Hello, my name is Zachary Freeman, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. We are going to talk about some experiences that I've had directly, but mostly we're going to talk about an overview of sort of quasi-political situation that I find myself weirdly in between. Now, some of you may be aware that my advocacy for my own situation as a male sexual assault survivor is sometimes construed as anti-feminism, which I don't agree with. What you may not be aware of, and what a lot of people are actually not aware of, is that there's a massive ideological division between people who are talking about issues that affect men right now. And typically when we're dealing with issues that are affected by men, are mostly categorized as right-wing or what are known as as a part of the men's rights movement. But there's actually more than just that, and a lot of other stuff going on. So in this video, I wanted to kind of break down what those groups are and how they've affected me as I've attempted to sort of get the word out, find support. And it's kind of a weird situation to be in because I'm just somebody who's had a lot of really negative experiences. And while I could write at length and speak at length about how gender norms and gender politics have affected me since I've grown up, the purpose of this is kind of what it's like stepping in the middle of a culture war just by coming out and saying that I am a victim in the first place. A great number of the people who have ghosted me, who've antagonized me based on a perception that to come out as a victim and being man puts me in a certain category that is diametrically opposed to their ideology based on gender politics. Regardless of whether or not that's true. So I wanted to break down what it's like to be in the middle of this and me attempting to walk the tightrope. So when we deal with gender politics, the most mainstream and group and movement and the biggest organization of sort of people or umbrella that they're underneath that everyone probably knows about is feminism. And traditionally, feminism is designed as an equal rights movement that focuses on female or feminine issues. That's both too broad and also doesn't incorporate a lot of things that feminism is in, and it would be an entire video unto itself or an entire course, and you can get a PhD in this. It's a really complex sort of field of gender politics it's all umbrellaed under, but typically feminism, it's in the name, is generally canted towards the feminine perspective because the male perspective is seen to have culturally dominated discourse in the Western world and in the Far Eastern world. It's not that I disagree with a lot of that, nor do I disagree with a lot of what feminism typically stands for. On the other hand, there is kind of a thought that some of feminism is radicalized and has now somewhat turned into a hate group against men or those who find themselves in traditionally masculine roles or against masculinity in general. And that's where the men's rights movement typically, but does also, painting too broad of a brush, sits. And ideologically, politically, generally, feminists are on the left, and the men's rights movement is on the right, politically. This, again, isn't always the case, but it plays a large part of how people have sort of tribalistically factionalized around it. Interestingly, that used to not always be the case. There was kind of a men's movement in the 1960s that walked hand in hand with feminism. And the men's rights movement as it is today split away from what was known as men's liberation. And there is a subreddit called /r/menslib that is more in line with feminist values. The men's rights movement typically takes the stance that either that feminism has gone too far, or certain sects of feminist ideology, or people who espouse to be feminist, have become they promote misandry, against the sexism against men. One of the places that I have experienced this is at Oglethorpe. The majority of the administrators are women. This is true in a lot of colleges, and they never took me seriously because I was a man. I was told this point blank to my face multiple times. Because I was a man, I should just take it. Because I was a man, I can't be sexually assaulted. So that sort of sexism does exist, and people, from my perspective, people who get in positions of power, and particularly if they're all part of some sort of like socioeconomic or other like racial, gender type, if they become too similar in a seat of power, they will begin to exclude those that are not like them. Like, that's how we got to like the white male oppressor, but it could happen in any sort of scenario, in any bubble, and that seems to be what's happened at Oglethorpe, and it is also kind of a narrative that has been playing out in colleges, and it's that, and coupled with some other things, has dropped male attendance at higher education by a lot. Most colleges, it's 60-40 or more women to men, and women paid less to go to college to earn similar degrees. They tend to do better and find themselves in elite clubs and stuff like that. And it's kind of a course correction for like how it used to be that men had men-only clubs and fraternities and stuff like that. But some feel that it's corrected too far. I wouldn't say that it's corrected too far, more than perhaps the nature of power has corrupted what was intended to be a temporary corrective measure. But in contrast, men's liberation takes a more feminist view that patriarchy and toxic elements of masculinity reinforce the issues that face men. I have also felt this. Most of the men and women that I have come out to or have commented in a public forum about being a victim call me weak for doing so, and the fact that I could be victimized is seen as weakness. I've had men say, well, why didn't you just enjoy the sex? Aren't you man enough? Or that I must be gay. There's nothing wrong with being gay, but that I must be. That's the toxic element of what is meant to be a man. And I've also been made incredibly poor and destitute by what's happened, and that's also seen as non-manly. I need to be the breadwinner, I need to be earning money, those sorts of negative things, and you're supposed to pull yourself from the bootstraps, and you're supposed to win this fight alone because you're a man, and men don't ask for help. So I get that part of it too. If I were being completely frank and honest, I lean way more towards men's liberation, but men's liberation is incredibly small now. There are very few people, and part of the reason why it's so tiny is because feminism has become almost entirely dominant female. If you're not actually female or LGBTQ, you kind of don't. You definitely get to the feeling early on that you don't belong in the club. You can be an ally, but you can't be one of us. And one of the arguments I tried to make early on when I was in any of that stuff on campus is I was like, no, you should represent me too. Because equality should be for everyone. What's happened is that as I've attempted to find support online, I found the factions to be diametrically opposed to each other, and they refuse to talk to each other. And the fact that I talk to one or the other antagonizes the other group. And this has kind of come to the head. I was intending, and I still intend to come to Dragon Con. I don't have enough money for a badge, but to stand outside, get some poster board, raise awareness for what's happened to me and other men like me, and try to do something positive. And I decided to promote this idea and be like, hey, anybody else who's on these subreddits, both of which tackle the same issues of like men, an epidemic of mental suicide, that men find themselves on the wrong side of state-sanctioned violence more than women, disproportionately more than women, disproportionately longer jail sentences, lack of rights for fathers, inability to get into what is now seen as traditionally female job roles like teaching and nursing, that sort of thing, and of course being a male victim of domestic abuse and sexual violence. They handle the same issues. They just take a different approaches to the cause, but they are deeply, deeply factionalized. And I wanted to promote this little gathering I had an idea for on men's liberation, and I was denied the ability to do so really effectively. I could still post, but I couldn't post about it. And I was given kind of a really terrible, not so great excuse as to why. I won't get into. But I was like, this is meant to be positive, and I feel more comfortable in the men's liberation subreddit, even though it's smaller, because I sort of ideologically fit better in that paradigm, even though I think the MRA, men's rights advocates, as they call themselves, still have some pretty solid points. And I got pretty much almost nothing but antagonism for saying that. And part of it was because I post in MRA as well. So I went to MRA, and they were more than happy to put my stuff up as a sticky, and people would be positive and want to, come and show up. And it shows another kind of hypocrisy and just an issue in general. Because remember, this is also left-wing versus right-wing. So this is Democrat versus Republican. You can feel that's a part of it. And it's been difficult trying to get support, because I'd go to MRA, post the same thing I posted on Men's Lib. And on MRA, they're like, why can't you afford X, Y, and Z? Why are you homeless? Fix your own shit. It's kind of the thing. But, they would send me direct aid, like, legal aid, and have actual resources available. Much more like go to action, which fits into the sort of the right-wing model of action before words, On the other hand, on the left side, I get lots of positivity. People who are very loving and will sit and talk with me for hours and have been great. But not a lot else. Telling me things that they think I should do, but no actual resources or action at all. Very anemic to action. So part of the problem with me posting on that is people are just showing up with posters. That might antagonize somebody. Yeah, people will disagree with you. You should start an open dialogue with them. And that's kind of been a problem politically, Democrats and liberals, socialists as well, have difficulty organizing because they're just sort of great about talking about the philosophy of what's wrong with the country and stuff like that, but actually galvanizing a vote, going out in a demonstration. There are tons of protests, sure, but they're kind of anemic. There are no boycotts that have any teeth. And then Republicans, take direct action constantly in almost a Machiavellian way, and that's kind of why they're attractive to co-opt. If you're trying to gain power, if you can co-opt that movement, you'll get people who absolutely will show up to vote and do things. They tend not to, and again, they tend not to think things through. They tend to vote for people who are ideologues, who are just profiting off of them. They tend to be manipulated quite a bit more. Not to say the Democrats aren't susceptible to the same thing, just not nearly as much. but yeah, and that's kind of the state of where we are. And I've found myself weirdly as just trying to find support and to try to help other people who've been in my situation, thrust into the division that the country is in, and that how it has touched everything down to our gender politics. The fact that I call it gender politics highlights the issue. It's kind of a mess. I really, to be very frank, I feel like I shouldn't have to walk a tightrope to ask for help, to want to like meet people who are supportive and to support other people. This shouldn't be like a political issue. Somebody did something terrible to me, and an institution categorically did something horribly wrong. I think it should just be corrected, and it shouldn't really matter if you're red team or blue team. And the fact that I refuse to directly pick a side, and treat people as individual human beings, like, offends people. It's really a bizarre state of affairs. This is an issue that's worthy of a far more professional video than I'm putting together right now. Like, if I could get like Ollie at the Philosophy Tube to break this down with like really whiz-bang animations or whatnot, it'd be great. But I just kind of wanted to rant a bit and sort of, I don't know, vent my frustration at this greater issue. Because ultimately I want everyone to be equal. And I think that's kind of what everybody wants. When MRAs get frustrated at feminists who say, I'm afraid of angry white men, I agree that those feminists are being racist and misogynistic, or misogynistic. That's right. They're being sexist and racist, and that's wrong, and it's not helpful. On the other hand, I definitely agree with feminists and the very few people who categorize themselves as men liberation, that there are elements of MRAs that are toxic, are traditionalists, are trying to get back entitlements. The incel movement is full of that. I just kind of wish that they would try to open a dialogue more and see the opposite side as a human being. I mean, that's how you would solve the problem with like someone who's an incel and all the craziness that's involved with that movement. Is reach out to that person who is lonely and has been hurt and find out why, and help them be a more manageable, agreeable member of society. And part of that is listening to why they were hurt, and they were probably hurt by a woman, and many of them are people who've come to me and turns out they had been sexually abused. We have to address that core issue and see it as valid before we can move forward. But anyway, that's my very unprofessionalist take on this very complex problem. Maybe at some other juncture I'll try to put together a better video once I get better at animating and editing. Thanks for listening.